How to use the full power of ArcGIS by using its web services. My name is Mark and I present the session together with Maarten and Roel. Maarten and I work at Esri Netherlands and Roel works at Esri Spain. And in our daily work we often automate processes or integrate systems. For doing that we are using the GeoInformation model. That means that we use the web services of ArcGIS to access its items and data. And with that you can connect a lot of systems together. So we automate and integrate using web services. All the web services in the ArcGIS platform are exposed through the REST API. That means that every item in the ArcGIS platform has a REST endpoint. Every feature service or web map can be manipulated through that REST endpoint. So that makes a very powerful combination for integrating and automating. So using the REST API, you can, for instance, use the ArcGIS Location Services. You can get an address by geocoding. You can use routing in your application, even if it doesn't contain a map. Or you can use geo-enrichment to add data to enrich your own data with data from other parties. By working with users, groups, and items, you can perform portal administration, and you can perform enterprise administration by, for instance, managing the security settings or registering data stores. So, using a REST API is based on performing requests. So how does that work? In this case, we have a survey 123 form, and a user is entering a new entry into the form. So what that means is that the form is performing an add feature request to the service, to the feature service that's underneath the survey 123 application. So to do this, survey 123 sends an add features request to the REST endpoint of the feature service, and sends a geometry and some attributes with it. And when the service processes this request, it responds with a result. And in this case, the result was successful, so it says success is true. This means that a new feature is added to the feature service. But because it's a service, it can also be used from other applications. For instance, I have the operations dashboard. The operation dashboard can query the same service that's underneath the server 123. So when it does that, and it gets all the items, the service will respond with another piece of JSON that contains all the information that was requested. And with that, you can use the service that's underneath server 123 to show the items in the operations dashboard. All of that is using the REST API. So the service has a REST endpoint, and both applications use that REST endpoint to put data in and get data out. And because it's a service, also developers can use those in their applications. Here you see the ArcGIS platform with the services and data in the bottom and the clients in the top. In between those is the REST API. So the REST API is the communication layer between the data and the layers and the clients that use them. And as you can see, there are many different clients. So it's desktop and web applications and mobile and even APIs. And this means that the REST API can be used by not only the standard applications in the ArcGIS platform, but also by scripts that are used for automating and integrating systems. So where do you find documentation on the REST API? Well, you can go to the website. The developers.arcgis.com/rest will take you to the page of the REST API. And here you find some basic information. You can find information on working with location services. You find the service reference of the REST API, where all functions are described. You can find information on how to work with users, groups, and items. And you can find information on how to perform enterprise administration. And as an example, I have opened the service reference for a feature service in this case, how to perform the add features request that I just talked about with survey. So you have the feature service URL, you have the add features method, and here are the request parameters you have to send with that to be able to perform the operation. And in the end, you have the response that you can expect from the service when you've done your request. So that's an introduction on the REST API. Now I will hand it over to Maarten, who will talk about security in the ArcGIS platform.
Thanks, Mark. ArcGIS has a lot of services, but some services require authentication. In ArcGIS, that authentication works through tokens. When a user wants to access a server that requires authentication, It first sends its credentials to a token service. The token service sends a token, returns a token with an expiry date, because tokens won't last forever. And the user can use that token to access the service that requires authentication, and then the service will return the data. To get a token from ArcGIS, you get the following options. Of course, you need a username and a password for it. There are some security measures on that token. We'll get to that later. And there's an expiry date. You can choose between various lengths, usually an hour. Let's see how that works. I created a small page that generates a token for me. I fill in my username and then I fill in my password in here. And I click generate. You'll see that this was just a form posting to ArcGIS, the generate token page. And when I copy that token, I can use that in a page. I created another small application which search groups in ArcGIS Online. And if I show groups, if I search for groups, it will just give me the publicly available groups. But if I enter the token and I use that token to search for groups, it will give me also the groups I am entitled to. Those are a few of my groups in ArcGIS Online. But let's go back to that first page. I not just generated the token, I also filled in the referer. That's kind of a security for the security, because that means that the token is only valid from pages that start with localhost. I got another application, that same application actually, only on a different domain. It's still on the same server. If I do the public search, it will still return the public search, the public groups, the tokenless search that is. But if I fill in the token, and remember that token was only valid for localhost and not for mvanhulsen.local, and then I search for him, then I get an error because the token is not valid for a page from this domain. And that is how the security in ArcGIS Online works. Now let's go to a rule for items, types, and search.
Thanks, Martin. Now that we know about security and how to manage it on the REST API, let's talk about item and item types. As probably you know, the REST API provides us with several endpoints to manage the items, but there is one which allows us to get the properties, type and type keywords. And they are used to differentiate between the many types that we can host on the platform, and the type keywords is used like an internal tagging system. So we will get more information about each item type. Let's see how they are used. So the type keyword, for example, is used to add a prefix when you are cloning an item from another, from one organization to another, to know the source of the item. It is also used to differentiate between the feature layer and the feature layer view. The type are the same, but the type keywords are not. And it is also used to differentiate between the different configurable apps that we can host on the platform. Also, the type keywords are used to define the interface of the item details page. As you know, not all of them look the same, and that's because of the item type. So it is also used for that. And as you can imagine, they are also used for a really important thing, which is building the categories or the filters within the platform. So talking about this, let's see an example through the REST API, how we can use these type keywords quickly. So I have prepared three calls to two different REST API. The first one is to query the ArcGIS Online database. If you send the type keyword through the REST API, you will, for example, in this case, see all the featured services that are in the platform. Well, not all, because we have a limit of 10,000, but you can recover, for example, interesting things like the VR experiences. You can get all the hosted layer views that you have in your organization, and many other things, as you can imagine, everything. The limit is your imagination, as I like to say. Another thing that you can do now in this is you can query the Living Atlas. The Living Atlas is using the same REST API, but the only difference is that you are querying a group, and a special one, which is this one, the one that you are seeing on the screen, that hosts all the information from the Living Atlas. So in this case, you can also query information from there and get all the feature services, for example, that are hosted on the Living Atlas through the REST API. As you see, I'm using this type keyword, but you can query on the documentation all the ones that are available. And the last example is querying the Hub API. And you can use, in this case, you cannot use the type keyword, at least at this moment, but you can query and use the type to filter datasets through this API. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Roel. So now that you know a bit more about items and item types in ArcGIS Online, let's take a look at how you can create your own items using code. One of the most powerful items in the ArcGIS platform is the web map. And the reason behind this is in the web map, everything comes together. So as a developer, you need very few lines of code to add it to your application because you don't need to write any code to define how the map looks like or what the pop-up should look like. All that can be done by the customer who owns the data and owns the application, because the web map is something the customer can define. He can tell which layers should be in there, how they should look, and what the pop-up should look like. And as a developer, you only need to add the web map to your application using the web map ID. The web map is part of what we call the Trinity, and the Trinity consists of the data and the services in the bottom, the web map that combines all those services, and the application that uses the services. And because the web map is so versatile, it can be used in many types of applications and many applications at once. So it can be used in JavaScript applications, it can be used in standard application in the platform, and all of those can use the same web map. And of course, a web map can use data from different sources. So you can combine a lot of information in a single web map. But of course, you can also combine that information in different web maps that can be used in different applications. And that way you don't have to republish your data and reuse it in different kinds of web maps. And because a web map is basically a piece of JSON that's stored in ArcGIS Online, you can use it as a blueprint to create a new one. And in this demo, I'm going to show you how. So what you see here is my content. And in my content, I've already created a web map to be used in this demo. And when I open this web map in the map viewer, you will see that it contains the municipal borders of the Netherlands, and the layer is called Municipal Borders 2019. And the name of this layer is something I'm going to change when creating the new web map. And like I said, a web map is just a piece of JSON that's stored in ArcGIS Online. So you can use that as a blueprint to create a new web map. And for that, you can use the ArcGIS Online Assistant. If you sign into that and you say, I want to view an items JSON, and then choose the web map that's going to be your blueprint, you will see that it actually consists of a description part and a data part. The description part is used to set some parameters, which I'm going to do in my script as well. And the data part is the actual blueprint for the new web map. It contains the layers with the layer names and so on and so on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this piece of JSON. There's a button for that here. And then I'm going to switch to Visual Studio Code, where I've already created a new JSON file. I'm going to paste it in here. And then I'm going to change the name of the layer. So the Municipal Borders 2019, I'm going to change that to my name, demo, and save this file. Here I have a Python file, which is used to create new web map for me. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a name, because that's a parameter I want to reuse. And Martin will show later on in this session how this can be useful in other places as well. Then I'm going to load the data from the JSON that I've just pasted my JSON from the template web map into. I'm going to set a few parameters like the title and the tags. And then I'm going to load that JSON into the web map info part of the new web map. And then by using the add item on my portal, I can create a new item. And for that, I already fill in the ID of the folder where I want to put it, because then it puts it in the right folder immediately. So when I run this script, it will take a few seconds. And if all goes well, it will create a new web map for me. And it went well because I got back a new ID for the web map. I got back the folder ID in which it placed it, which was exactly the folder where I wanted to have it. So when I go back to my content right now and I refresh it, you will see that there's a new web map created. It has my title in there. And when I open this one in the map viewer, you will see that it still contains the municipal borders, but the name is now changed to Municipal Borders MJAG Demo instead of 2019. So that's how we create a web map from code by using an existing web map as a blueprint. And with that, I'll hand it over to Raoul again, who's going to talk about the Cascade model in ArcGIS Online.
Thanks, Mark. Now I'm going to explain how the Cascade model works. And what do I mean? Well, like in CSS, you can define many styles on different places to define the web style itself, right? So in ArcGIS, you can define the map properties also in many places, and based on where they are defined, they can be overridden by the previous ones. So on this table, you will see that not every property can be defined on every place. So I think it's better to show this with an example. Here, I have a hosted feature service, and let's focus on this first layer. On the definition of the layer, we will find that it already have a renderer, right? Let's open this service on the map viewer. As you can see here on the URL, this service has by default a color ramp a renderer defined. What I have done next is encapsulate this feature service within an item. So I have copied this URL, I have created an item, and this is the same URL. But after doing that, I have gone here to the visualization tab. I have changed the renderer and also the filter, because now I'm not displaying every state in here. And as you saw, the render is different, right? So, and that information is saved within the metadata of this item. Next, what I have done is I have created a web map loading from this item ID. So actually, if I click on here, view description, view it in details, you will see the item it's loaded. It's the same one, right? But if I refresh this web map, you will see the render is not the same, right? That's because I have already changed the render in here. And in the last sample, as you see, I'm doing this cascade on these levels. I have created a custom app. Let's see quickly the code. So what I have done in here is, first, I have loaded this web map. Then I have changed the base map. As you see in here, this is using the topographic map. Now I'm using in here the navigation map. So I'm overwriting the web map base map property. And at the same time, I'm also changing the extent, the default extent of this map. And afterwards, I'm also changing the renderer. Let me show you. If I go to New York, you will see it's using a purple color ramp. But if I refresh this one, you will see I have a blue one. That's because I'm taking the same color ramp, but I'm dividing by 2 the red color to reduce the red from here. But I can also completely overwrite the renderer, and I can even use renderers that are not by default available in the viewer. So I hope this was helpful to better understand how the Cascade model works. So back to you, Martin.
Thanks, Raoul. Let's talk about webhooks. Webhooks are a great way to get data from a service. We used to get data from a service by polling the service every 5 minutes or 10 seconds. And we usually get the answer, no, there is no new data available. With webhooks, we can just say to the service, give me a call on this URL when there's anything new to process. We already had support for webhooks through Survey 123. Survey 123 only had webhooks on the application level. When the survey entered a new feature into the service, the application also sent the data to a webhook. So we were dependent on Survey 123 to have the webhook fired. But now ArcGIS also has support for webhooks on the service level. That means the feature service will send data to the webhook when there's new data. So it doesn't matter anymore if the data comes from ArcGIS Online, for Web App Builder, or from Collector. Let's see how that webhook is set up. When you go to a web service page, this is just the item page from the service in ArcGIS Online, and you scroll down over to the service URL. When you open that, then between REST and services, you enter /admin. Then you go into the admin page of the service. If your service is set up correct, then here on the right bottom corner, there are webhooks. If we click on that, we can see that this service already has one webhook enabled. If we go into the properties of that one, we'll see that it offloads to an Azure function. In this case, the Azure function is set up to give me a Telegram message when then there's a new feature created or there's a feature updated. So let's see if that works. I've got the REST endpoint of the feature service right here, and I can just insert a service, insert a feature for that. I'll copy this bit, I'll paste it in here, and I'll just say add feature, and the webhook will fire and the Esri function will also fire. I could also do it from ArcGIS Online, the ArcGIS Online map viewer. I can just insert a new point, insert here from ArcGIS Online, including typo. And of course, I can also do it from another one. And you already see that the Telegram messages are getting inserted, I'm receiving the messages. I'll just add this one and they'll insert. They're not coming right away. That's because the webhooks are delivered to only fire after 30 seconds. That's because you can insert a lot of data at once into the in the service, and we don't want the webhook to fire every time. So the webhook sends the data to a service, but it doesn't send the actual data. It sends, hey, there is new data between these server generations, kind of like version. Between this time and this time, there are new edits. The feature service, the webhook service can just ask to the feature service, okay, prepare those changes for me. And the feature service sends back that the changes are ready on a certain URL. This is the URL, the service, the features are ready. And then we can get that file of services and we get the exact features that are added in between this session. So this is a really great way to only have something start when you have received new data into your service. Let's go to Mark for ArcGIS Location Services.
Thanks, Martin. So let's talk about ArcGIS Location Services. Since the launch of ArcGIS platform, Esri has improved their offering of location services. The most well-known are, of course, the base map services, the geocoding services for getting addresses, and the routing services. But you can also use other services in your applications, like spatial analysis, or you can use the geometry service to create buffers or intersects. You can use a GeoEnrichment service to add data from other sources to your own data. And you can use the elevation service to add elevation information to your own data. For using the location services, you need either an API key or an ArcGIS identity. And if you choose to use an ArcGIS identity, the user location services will cost credits that will be withdrawn from your organization. So, to see how I can use the ArcGIS Location Services, I've put together a demo. I was wondering, when I drive to the office from home, I pass two mountains on the way to the office. And these are actually hills that are only 12 meters high. But anyway, in the Netherlands, we call those things mountains. So I was wondering if I would create an elevation profile, if I would be able to see those mountains in my services. So to do that, I've created a Postman collection. And the first thing I need to do is, of course, generate the route from my home address to the office. And to generate a route, you need a starting address and a destination address. So I use the geocode service to generate the locations of my home address and the address of the office. And for this, because I don't store the outcome of these geocodes, there's no token required, so there's no credits involved here. So now I have two locations, two XY coordinate pairs. So I can use the routing service, the world routing service, to generate the route to the office. To do that, I do need a token because a routing service does require that. In the stops parameter, I put the addresses or the coordinate pairs of the home address and the office address. And I say that I don't want to get any directions because I'm only interested in the line. So when I perform this query, I get a polyline back that corresponds with the route from my home to the office. So I've built a small application, a web application, where you can see those results. So the first one is the route from my home address to the office, and this is what it looks like. But I was not interested in the route. I was interested in if I could see the elevation on my route. So I need to generate points with elevation based on this route. For that, I'm using the world elevation service and put a query out to that. And that takes a bit more parameters. Of course, you still need a token. Of course, I want to return a z-value, so because I want to have the altitude, the height. And in the input line features, I put the line, which is the route from my home to the office. So when I run this request, you see that I get a polyline back with XY coordinates and a z-value, the altitude. So if I turn those, if I take all the vertices from this polyline and turn them into points, then I will get a set of points with XY coordinates and a Z value. So if I go back to my sample application and I click on the the elevation profile on the route, you can see that it's turned all the vertices in points, and the color of the points indicates the altitude. So the light blue color is a low altitude and the dark blue color is a high altitude. Now, if I put the layer with the terrain information on, you can actually see that where the terrain is the dark red color, it's a higher altitude, and where it's a green blue color, it's the low altitude. And here are the two mountains I talked about. Mountains, still 12 meter high. But you can see clearly that in the blue lower sections, the blue-green sections, I have light color points, and in the dark red-brown sections, I have dark color points, which indicate that the altitude is higher. And this works for natural phenomena like these hills in the landscape. But near the town of Meppel, I have two overpasses. And even they are visible in the world elevation service. So you see here the roads that are higher than their surroundings have a darker color. And when there's an overpass, like right here or right here, you see that the color of the points actually turns darker there as well. So that indicates that the route is higher there than anywhere else. Now, I was also wondering through which municipalities I actually drive on my way to the office, because you can see the route is about 70 kilometers and there's a number of municipalities on the way. So how do I do that? Well, I go back to my Postman collection and I do actually perform a pretty basic functionality on a feature service, which is the query. Because with the query, I can set a where parameter. In this case, 1 is 1, because I want to have everything back. I want to have the out fields, which is the municipality name in this case. But what I'm doing here is I'm doing a spatial intersect, which means I'm putting in a geometry and I want to have the geometries back from the service that contains the municipality in the Netherlands that correspond or that my line crosses. So in the geometry, I put my routing line, and the result I get back are the municipalities that I cross on my way to work. So I actually get a couple of polygons back with a name. So if I go back to my sample application, you can see that these are the municipalities I pass on my way to work. And it's nice to have the information on which municipalities I pass, but it's also nice to enrich that information with extra information so I get more value. And I was wondering, from all those municipalities that I pass through, what is the most consumed beer in all those municipalities? And we have a party that's offering data, demographic data that contains this kind of information. They're called 4Orange, and you can use the GeoEnrichment service to query their data and enrich your own data in your application. So what I'm going to do now is perform a query on the 4Orange data, and then add that data to these polygons of the municipalities. So here I have the GeoEnrichment service, and it takes a number of parameters again. Of course, it takes a token, the main thing is that I want to have I put in the study areas, which are the municipalities, and I want to have the alcohol consumption as a return value. And once I run this request, I get an answer, and in that answer, there's a 2019 usual lager, which means the lager that's most consumed for each municipality in 2019. So when I enrich my own data with this extra data I got from 4Orange, the result is visible in the map here. So as you can see, in most municipalities, the most consumed beer in this case is Amstel. It's a Dutch beer. But there's one municipality that's in the same city as where I work, it's Zwolle. And there's another brand that's Heineken, probably very well known to all of you. And I know Martin's alcohol behavior, so I'm pretty sure that he's solely responsible for the fact that Heineken is the most consumed beer in Zwolle and not in the other municipalities. So can you actually check this information if it's correct? Well, there's sort of a check, so I've built that in as well. If I run the check request, I get a municipality where there's another type of beer or another brand of beer that's being most consumed. It's called Grols, and it's the city of Enschede. And I think this is a valid check because Enschede is actually the city where the Grols brewery is located. So that way, this is one of the ways where you can use a lot of the ArcGIS Location Services to perform different actions on your data, enrich your data, and so on and so on. So with that, I'll hand it over to Raul, who's going to talk about configurable apps.
Thanks, Mark. Now I'm going to explain how you can build your own custom template or your own configurable app. As you know, there are many available, but you can build your own ones really easy. How do we do that? Well, as you can see here, I'm using a Hello World sample. I'm just taking the parameters from the URL, and this line I'm getting the DOM element. I'm checking if one parameter is ready on the string itself. In case it isn't, I will display, okay, the app ID is not present. If it is, I will prepare to be sending a call request to the API to get the metadata or the data of the item resource. If I don't get a success message, I will display the error. If I get a success message, I will recover the JSON from the request, and I will just take one piece of information, in this case one property, and set it on the item itself. So I'm not displaying a mapping here, but I just want to keep it really, really simple. To do this demo, I have used ngrok to create a tunnel because I need an HTTPS URL because my organization requests so. I have HTTPS enabled as everyone. So as you can see here, this is the template working. It's displaying the message as expected. There is no app ID there. Let me change. Okay, now I have the URL with the HTTPS. How do I register this template on my organization? Well, first I need to go to my content and create a web mapping application, set it as configurable. I will set the URL of the template, give it a name like my first templates, add item. Next, I will need to set the configuration parameters. I will do that on the setting tabs, and here I need to paste, or create a JSON object. If I go to the documentation, I will find in here some snippets that I can directly use. So this is the settings, the main part, and now I'm going to define just one field, the title. So I'm going to paste this in here. Let me change this to title and title. And here I need to replace this for a string. I'm going to use a rich text. So save. And now I'm ready to use this template. The only thing I need to do is to share this with one group I have previously created and change the setting on my organization to read from here when I create new app template. So if I go again to content, as I said, I went to settings previously, and clicking on here, I will be seeing my template in here. So my instance, and done. Now what the platform is doing behind the scene is getting the config object and setting this field, which was the one I created. So hello world, I will click on save. Now you are seeing a 403 error message. That's because the application that was created is only visible for the owner. So I not implemented the recover token in the application, so I need to make it public. So if I open this, as you saw, now we have the hello world message in here because it was recovered through the API. I hope this was helpful. Martin is going to show a really cool example on how to work with your self-service story mapping.
Thanks, Raul. We've talked about a lot of things in ArcGIS today. We talked about how security works. We talked about items and item types and how you can search for them and how you can create them. We talked about our Cascade model and how everything fits together. We talked about webhooks and what they can do for you. And we talked about location-based services and how you can include them in your application. And we thought about how can we fit all those things together in one demo, in one last demo for you. That's when we created self-service story mapping. Let me walk you through this. We start with a good old GeoForm. There we can enter some information, and of course that is stored in a feature service. That feature service has a webhook enabled on it, and that webhook will send data to an Azure function, and that Azure function will do a lot of things for us. First, it will determine where the location of the point from the GeoForm is, in what region, and will create a route from that point to our office in Zwolle. After that, it will also create a web map, specially filtered to that point and that route. Then it will create a story map based on that web map and the data entered from the GeoForm. If there's an ArcGIS Online username filled in, it will also create a group and invite that user to that group. And if an email address is filled in, it will send an email to that user with a link to the story map. Let's see how that works. I have my story map set up here, and I have already entered some information. I only have to add a picture, which is set up here, and enter a location. I'll put my point there. And then I'll submit my entry. The picture will upload, and now the webhook will do its thing. Here we can see all the items I created today. As you can see, I've not been very productive today. But if I refresh my page, I can see that there are two items generated, the web map and the story map. I can, of course, open that story map and see there's a story map for me. There's the picture I uploaded, and there's the route and the point I created. If you want to have your own story map created by this tool, you can. You can try this out yourself. You go to this URL and you can fill out the GeoForm and it will generate a story map and a web map just for you. This URL will also be available on this URL. And on this URL, all the demo code we showed you today will be available for you to look at and try out yourself. So go check out esrinederland.github.io. Thank you. Just a reminder to, if you provide your feedback for this session by clicking the survey link down below. And again, go to this URL to see all the code we've showed you today. Thank you. Okay, then I think it's time for us to go to some Q&A. We got some nice questions in. Let's start with the top question. Let's just review them in order of thumbs ups. The question is there more documentation on configuring webhooks? Yes, there is. I'll take this question myself. Sorry, Raoul and Mark. I'll just quickly share my screen. If you go to the developer's website, developers.arcgis.com, and you click on documentation, and then there's the REST API, which is over here. You go to the overview, you go to the location, no, the service reference, that's where the documentation of the service is. And then, you're seeing my screen? No, you're not seeing my screen, right?
I wasn't. Okay, now I am.
Now you're seeing my screen, sorry. Developer website, documentation. There's the REST API overview. Then you go to the service reference page. And then here on the complete bottom, there's the administrator webhooks. So this is the documentation about how you configure webhook. And if you go to the create, for example, there you can also see which type of events are in the, we can have a webhook from. So you can have a webhook created only on features created or features updated, or only if attachments are deleted or something like that. So you can have these different values of here. That about webhooks. I'll stop sharing. Then there's the question about, is there another way to get an item's JSON besides using ArcGIS Online Assistant?
Do you mind
Mark,
if I take this one? Right?
Oh, Raoul, fine.
Yeah. Okay, let me share my screen. Yes, the answer is yes, of course. I will show you the trick I used to use to know which endpoints are being used by the platform. Share. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So what I used to do is to go to the interface I know it's using or could be potentially using the endpoint. Like in this case, for example, I'm in the details, item details page. I used to open the developer tools. And in this case, the easiest way for me to remember which is this endpoint is copy the ID from the URL, just paste the URL here on the network tab on the filter input text, and then refresh the site. So here, as you notice, well, let me increase the font size. As you notice, there are a few endpoints that have been called through the interface. And the second one, if you click in here, or well, opening a new tab, you will see that here you will receive this item JSON. But of course, if you go also to the developer side, to the documentation, and then on the REST API overview, here on the user groups and item tab, you can scroll here. There is a section for the items, and here you scroll down to the item itself. So here you will find how to use this endpoint. And that's the answer. So this next question, I hope it's clear.
Next question is from Mark, I think. Where can we access that beer consumption data?
Yeah, well, you can access it if you pay for it because it's a premium data set. So there are a couple of companies that collect a lot of data, and 4Orange is one of them. They are located in the Netherlands, and they collect consumer data, and they service this data, or they make this data available through ArcGIS Online, so or through the ArcGIS platform. So if you're a customer of Esri, you need to pay an additional fee to access this data, actually. So it's a premium data set.
Great. Then a question about, I've seen sessions where you swizzle hosted feature layers and hosted feature layer views. I've also seen a tool from Esri under development. Are there any plans to assist users to hot swap hosted feature layers and hosted feature layer views? We've talked about this, and we don't know any tool for hot swapping. I know you can do it through the REST endpoints, because creating a feature layer view is also just a REST endpoint and a call you can do through Python or any language you wish. Also, so is editing a view, and you should be able to hot swap the feature layer view and the feature layer. Just remember to also add the relationship between the two. Remove the relationship between the old layer and the view, and create a new relationship between the new layer and the view. As long as you do that, then you should be fine. But Mark, we do some cool scripts. Maybe we should create a script for it and then publish it on LinkedIn or get on our GitHub repository of cool scripts.
Actually, Martin, I just remember I wrote for the last developer summit in Berlin some code and some documentation about how to create hosted feature layer views from the REST API. I can share the Postman collection which I used there, so maybe that's useful.
Yeah, maybe we can put it on the GitHub repository for this session. So it will be on esrinederland.github.io. Now on the top, again, something from Webhooks. Sorry, guys. It's me again. In your demo, you used Azure to send the email from the Webhooks. Other than Azure, what else can we use to send emails from Webhooks? Sending an email is not part of the webhook. The webhook really ends when it posts its data to another endpoint. That endpoint can be anything. It can be your own website. It can be an Azure function. It can be Integromat or Zapier or MS Power Automate. It's just, Webhook is just, okay, from this one application, it sends data to an HTTP endpoint. Whatever comes behind that endpoint is completely up to you. It can be your own stuff or anything else. I usually do an Azure function with Python on it. I know a colleague who's really a fan of Azure function with C# on it. I know a few colleagues who are really fan of Microsoft Power Automate. It doesn't really matter what you use. I sometimes use Power Automate, especially if I do a webhook from survey 123. That's because Power Automate also has really easy things to send emails out. But I've also got an Esri function which uses SendGrid for it. I got an account there. Sometimes we use an Office 365 account. So that's really different types. Depends on what you use from that as a receiving endpoint of the webhook. Can be anything. So that also answers that question.
Martin, I have another example on how I use Node.js to receive the webhook. So I have another repo I can add to the. I will do it. So.
Cool. Then the next question. Can you go over the difference between REST and the Python API? And when you would use each for admin purposes?
I can take that.
Take it.
I can take that question. Yeah. The difference is that the Python API uses the REST API to do its request. So in this specific case, for admin purposes, the main difference is that the Python API combines a lot of requests. So you need to do less requests on your own for doing the same things, for doing the same administration purposes. The other difference between the Python API and the REST API is that some things can be done in the REST API that can't be done in the Python API, and the other way around. So for instance, deep learning stuff, that's something you need the Python API for. But the REST API is more, there's more functionality in there than in the Python API. But for admin purposes, then the Python API uses the same REST API calls, only it combines them in shorter calls, so you need to do less work. So you need to write less lines of code. So if your purpose is to do administration on your portal, then the Python API would be a good suggestion. If you want to keep a more grip on what you're doing on the individual requests, you can use the REST API directly.
And don't forget about the REST.js, right? The other library we have recently released on GitHub, which is called ArcGIS REST.js, I think, right?
Yes, that's correct. So that's a good that's another way you can use the REST API from another source. So yeah,
it's from JavaScript on. Yeah. The next question again about webhooks, hot topic. Can webhooks be configured for service published on ArcGIS server? And I'm assuming you mean enterprise, because like it's always with a portal. Not yet, and I think still not on 10.9. I know it's not in 10.8.1, and I thought I was still not on 10.9. But I'm guessing it's coming. I don't know an exact release date or release version. Sorry. Then a question from Zach, who put in a lot of questions. Thank you, Zach, for that. We got a lot of people named Zach. Could you please restate the 3 items composing the Trinity? Mark?
Yep, I can do that. So the Trinity is the 3 things that belong together. On the bottom, you have the data. So that's the feature services and all the other data you have in your portal. The middle layer would be the web map. So the web map is the place where you actually combine all that data. So you create the web or you create the map that you want to use. And the top layer is the application that uses that. And that can be one of the standard apps, default applications, or it can be a custom application built by you using the JavaScript API or the runtime APIs or whatever. So, and the good thing, that's why we call it a Trinity. They belong together. So you need the web map to consume the data from your portal, and you need an application to actually consume the web map. But because you are using a web map, you can use different applications. And for example, if you have an application that uses a web map ID as a URL parameter, you don't have to rebuild the application or host another instance of that application. You can just use the web map ID as a URL parameter and use the exact same application to consume 2 different web maps for example, 2 different customers. So that's we see a lot of times that people duplicate either applications or web maps or duplicate data. And the whole idea behind the Trinity is that that's not necessary. You don't need to duplicate anything. You just need to be smart about how you use it. So I hope that answers your questions.
Yep. Then we're still on webhooks. What's the benefit of using a webhook over GeoEvent for automatic notifications when a new record is added? Well, quite simple. GeoEvent has to poll for every few seconds or every minute for is there new data, is there new data? And a webhook only fires when there's actually new data. So it's much less traffic. Now I know traffic is not something we all pay for, so does it really matter? No, but it's more clean as well. It's more clean if you do it with a webhook. The advantage for webhook is also that it can be triggered on if there's a new attachment or if there's something edited or things like that. So webhooks do have their advantage over GeoEvent. Your question was answered. The Trinity question was answered correctly, Mark. Thank you. So, then one for Raoul. Your Cascade coding. Do those scripts need to be created using HTML?
No, of course not. I did it with web technologies because I'm more a web developer, but that's something actually on the model itself, how the technology is built. So with any SDK, you can do the same demos I have done, because what I'm trying to, or I was trying to explain there, is that on the specifications we have defined at Esri, so the JSON specification which are stored in the platform are being inheriting this kind of property. So with the runtime SDKs, you are taking the same JSON specs and building on top of that. So you just need to use the right method. So on the SDK you're using that. It's nothing only for web developers.
Cool. Then a question for Mark. You mentioned using the portal for developing an API. In REST API, I assume. Does that mean we have to be using portal, or can we just use ArcGIS Online?
Well, that's maybe my bad. I tend to name those things the same because both are a portal. So ArcGIS Online is a portal, and ArcGIS Enterprise comes with a portal as well. So I think your question is, do we need ArcGIS Enterprise? No, you don't. You can use ArcGIS Online because in the end, the REST endpoints that you program against are more or less the same. I don't say exactly the same because they're not, but they are over 90% the same. So no, you don't need an ArcGIS Enterprise portal to be doing these kinds of things. You can do it in ArcGIS Online as well. And actually, that's most of what we do. So yeah. I'll just take the second question as well, Martin, because I think that's for me as well. Because, well, that's not the same question, but in the Postman routing example, what program are you using to develop your code? Well, in that case, it was just Postman. So I'm using the REST endpoint to ask my question against or to do my query. And I just use Postman as an interface. But you can use each REST endpoint on the REST API. It has its own HTML interface as well. So you can use that to test your questions or your queries. In this case, I use Postman because it's an easy interface and you can easily share what you want, because this is on the GitHub repo as well, this Postman collection. So that's why I use Postman in this case. But it's just to show that it doesn't matter what interface or language you use, as long as you can make an HTML request, and we've actually demonstrated it once on a session. Anything you can do an HTML request with, you can run against our REST API.
Yes. Someone is saying that there are webhooks on Portal, and yes, there are webhooks on Portal. Only those are on item level, so you can see when an item is created, when a web map is created or an app is created, not on feature level. So they're not inside the service. That's the difference between the webhooks in Enterprise and ArcGIS Online for now. I think we only have 30 seconds left, so I think we should keep it with the questions for now. I would like to thank you all for attending our session, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have additional questions. And see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.